Welcome to the HAYVN Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders, owners, and professionals are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Hear from industry experts on everything from marketing, leadership, financing, and more. Brought to you by HAYVN, a co-working space where you can connect, create, and get stuff done.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the HAYVN Hubcast. I'm your host, Nancy Sheed. And to say that I am excited is an understatement. I'm actually, I want to say, honored to be in conversation today with Fran Pastore. She is the founder and CEO of the Women's Business Development Council. And Fran, it's been a long time, but I'm excited to chat. Welcome.
Nancy, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here, and I'm really honored to have been asked. Thank you so much for having me.
Fran, we were talking beforehand, and I was like, Fran, we've known each other for quite some time, but we're going to dive into that. Before we go back, for those who are not familiar with the Women's Business Development Council, can you give us like the 30,000 view approach before we go back and talk about how it got started?
Of course, absolutely. So WBDC, which most people think is a radio station, is actually an organization that I founded and run in Connecticut. We've been around for nearly 30 years. Our objective is very simple. It's to help women launch and scale small businesses.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And that's how we met, through a friend's small business 20 plus years ago. But Fran, so you're coming on your 30-year anniversary of being a nonprofit we were just talking about. Take us back 30 years. Where were you? What was the catalyst? Was this something you wanted to be when you grew up? What was going on 30 years ago that sort of became the ideal time for you to do this?
So I'll just take a little step back further than 30 years ago. In high school and college, I was always working with people who were looking to start a business. I don't know what that was about. I was always trying to help someone open their retail store. I was always stocking shelves for someone, raising money for someone who perhaps their house had burned down or they didn't have something that they needed. So I was always very community minded. I also grew up in a very provincial Italian family where the objective for me was to get married and make babies when I graduated high school. And so my brain just wasn't functioning in that way. It wasn't something that I was interested in. So I was a little bit of a black sheep in my family in that I went to college at all. And so then I did exactly what my family wanted me to do. I promptly got married right after college and then had 2 babies and then promptly got divorced. And so at 33, I found myself a single unemployed mom with 2 little girls. My only job experience was on Wall Street. I hated every single minute of it. I worked at the New York Stock Exchange and had my rear slapped on more than one occasion on the trading floor. And I did not enjoy that work at all. And I did not want to go back to that work. I knew that I didn't want to commute from Stanford to Wall Street or commute from Stanford to New York at all, because I wanted to be available for my 2 girls. And I wanted them to have a strong role model in me, which I did not have that growing up in my family at all. And so I knew that I wanted to raise economically independent young women. And I think I've done that, but that's another story for another day. So
Yes. And congratulations.
Thanks. Yes. I can't let this moment go by without saying my daughter's my younger one is getting her doctorate from Penn next month. And I'm just so excited for her. So really exciting. Yeah, exactly. So here I am in Stanford. I was living here for 3 years. I had a network of amazing women who were all professionals, highly educated. I didn't realize it until then that I was born a feminist into this very provincial family that did not understand me. But here I met my peeps. And these women were determined to help me figure out how I was going to make a living to support these 2 little girls. And what we learned in the process of trying to figure that out was that Connecticut was the only state in the country that did not have a resource for women entrepreneurs to help them launch and scale small businesses. And so at that
And we're
moment,
talking 1990s. I just want to say, this is 1990s, right? When this is going on.
1995. This is
Okay.
95 to be
Okay.
precise. Yes.
Wow. I would have thought we would have been one of the first ones.
Right. And so little known fact is that in 1988, the Women's Business Ownership Act of 1988 was passed. And the reason that law was passed was because a group of women got together to look at what the impact of women entrepreneurs was on our national economy. Now, this is in the earlier 80s, right? I'm backing up a little bit.
Right.
And what they learned was that there was no data. And so they set out to figure that out. Like, what was missing? Why was there no data? And so one member of Congress, a senator who had daughters and a wife, was the champion behind the Women's Business Ownership Act of 1988. And so that law did a couple of things. And we learned that one of the reasons why there was no data was that women still in 1988 could not access capital in their own names for commercial purposes. So imagine our mutual friend who introduced us 20 years ago was a successful woman in business in 1987, and her business was thriving and her balance sheet was strong. And she decided she wanted to expand. Maybe she wanted to take over the space next door. Maybe she wanted to open up a new location. Maybe she wanted to buy a building. Well, she couldn't without a male co-signer the age of 16 years of age or older. And so this law set out to change that. And in 1988, the Women's Business Ownership Act was passed, and it did a few things. One was that it eradicated all state laws that mandated a male co-signer when a woman was seeking a commercial loan. That was
And
the
this
first
is
thing.
and for perspective, this is only 14 years after women were allowed to have credit cards on their own.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Like, I mean, to me, I was like, I can't believe this. And I'm like, well, it was only 14 years later that we'd had credit
Right.
cards. So what the heck? Okay. I appreciate this timeline.
Yeah. I mean, let me go back even further and say at the turn of the century, we were still chattel, right? So we basically had less rights than children. And by the way, if we were to get divorced, whether we were in an abusive marriage or whatever, we immediately lost custody of our children, including the fact that our children could not live with us. And the reason being was that a woman presumably had no way to make a living, right? So it wasn't that we weren't capable, we were just discounted. And so we lost access to our children. We became probably somewhat destitute, but the husband was free to go on and marry and raise our children with someone else. So you have to really think about that timeline and all the things that happened between the turn of the century and 1974, because it's when the Fair Credit Act was passed. All right, so now we're back to 1988. This law gets passed. It does a couple of things. One of them is to eradicate that state law, the state laws around banking and women securing commercial loans. And the other thing that it does is it provides funding for the Office of Women's Business Ownership. And the purpose of the Office of Women's Business Ownership was to spur economic activity for women to help them launch and scale their businesses. Mm-hmm. But how are women really going to do that when they didn't have access to resources, right? So this funding that was allocated to this office was in the form of a couple of $1 million. We're not talking about a lot of money here, barely a rounding error in the national budget. And $150,000 grants were made available to states that applied. And so Connecticut had not applied. And fast forward, 1997, 9 years later, Connecticut had not applied. And so we applied. We formed a corporation. You have to be a nonprofit. So we formed a nonprofit and then we applied for the funds. And it took about 18 months to get those funds. And we got our grant in the fall of 1998. And from there, we started working with women, providing training, education, business counseling. $150,000 doesn't go very far. So the idea was, as I referred to earlier, helping people if their house burnt down or they needed something. I was always out there raising money. And so I had to start raising money for the organization. And the concept that what we were doing was very refreshing to philanthropists and private citizens and corporations, because it was an uplifting story. It wasn't the food bank. It wasn't child abuse or victims of rape. It was something that everybody could agree on because it was an economic activator.
I so appreciate that story, because in my verse is like, it's always been, and Fran's always been in charge and done an amazing job and made it grow. So the backstory is wonderful. And what I also appreciate is launching business, as well as you've just shared with us, you were aware of policy. So I feel like you've had these two tracks, right? Like really like hands-on supporting people, but also continuing to make people aware of what's going on in this space. And so what do you look at right now, jumping ahead, in terms of where is the leverage? Because I feel like we've also, I'm going to say it, like things feel harder for us than they did maybe several years ago for a million reasons. Where are you seeing, at your 30,000 view perspective, the leverage for helping women and their businesses move forward? Is it they need to be ahead in technology? Is it that we need more people representing us in Congress? Where are you focusing in terms of your energy?
I would say it's representation, because representation matters. One of the reasons why it still takes a woman an average of 6 attempts to secure capital from a bank, a traditional lender, is because the people on the other side of the table just don't look like her, right? So one of the reasons why it was only recently that clinical trials were started being performed on women, right? Congress mandated that only in the 1990s, was because the people that were conducting the clinical trials were not women. So in medicine, in society, in government, we need representation. And so I feel like for me, my life's work has been making sure that women have at least the access to the resources that they need to become economically self-reliant, build assets for themselves and their family, and really set a trajectory for themselves and their children and their whole family, so that we're teaching good habits of, there's a resource, that resource is practically free. Go out and use it to build your business and build yourself. And at WBDC, we always refer to the 3 C's: confidence, capital, and connections. And that's really what we pride ourselves on. For me, it's also making women aware of the fact that policies and laws do affect them. And so being politically engaged, it doesn't mean you have to be an activist. It doesn't mean you have to pick a side. It means that your level of awareness, because when I hear people say, oh, this election doesn't affect me, or this policy doesn't affect me. No, it really, really does. That law that passed in 1988 and that Fair Credit Act that passed in 1974, all of that took a lot of guts, a lot of tenacity, and a lot of people to see the importance of what we were missing out on. If women were fully participating in the economy, we'd have the world's largest GDP. And so having these facts and understanding where we came and where we are going, I think is really important and empowering. So that's also part of what we try to do at WBDC, is build in an advocacy, understanding advocacy and the importance of advocacy.
And I hear you saying to women business owners, you need to understand what's going on. Can you speak a little bit more about what you want policy makers to understand about what's going on in the world of women entrepreneurship? It sounds like there's a constant beating in the drum. What are they not getting? What are they misunderstanding? What do they need to know, aside from the fact that our GDP would be so much better? What are they still misunderstanding or not getting?
Well, I will tell you that we are lucky to live in the state of Connecticut, where the policymakers on both sides of the aisle, being led by our governor, who is a small business advocate, and with 2 daughters and a wife who are very successful in their own right, he has probably been one of the biggest champions that we've ever had in our state for small businesses, particularly women. So I'll put that on the side. On a national level, I will tell you that since 1988, when those few $1 million were allocated to the Women's Business Center program, we're only at $28 million today. And every year, my colleagues in DC and around the country and myself have to go to bat to beg, borrow, and steal to keep that allocation in the budget. And I will tell you that when the president's budget was presented to Congress back in October, the program was 100% completely eliminated. Now, since then, it has been put back in the budget. And so what I want to share is that all of this business around including women in these DEI initiatives, and what people fail to realize is that, like many groups, society has sidelined women for centuries. And so we are still dealing with the aftermath of those very, very, very deep-seated notions about a woman not being able to make decisions for herself. Case in point, 2022, when a healthcare right was completely removed because, of course, women can't make decisions for themselves. So what I would say, at the risk of being political, is that
it's personal.
Trust us. We know what we're doing. We can really make decisions for ourselves. We know how to handle money. I love Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank because he always says his most successful investments are women-led businesses. So that's what I would say, is that policymakers need to understand that we do have unique needs because we have been sidelined for centuries. And that sidelining still continues. It just looks a little different. Yeah, we're giving them these things. We're letting them do these things. But in fact, those things can be taken away at a moment's notice, which we saw in 2022. And we saw again this past October, this tiny little $25 million to help spur businesses that are women-led, that have the impact that's documented.
Well, I was going to say, so let's, on the positive, or here's what's going on in the positive. Let's talk about the impact in terms of economic, but also I know you're a proponent of like the impact in communities and in our environments and in the family. What are your sort of top lines that you share with people that they might not know about the impact that WBDC is making, as well as just understanding the huge impact that women business owners or women entrepreneurs are having?
Well, I think something really important to know is a study just came out a couple of weeks ago. I believe it was in Forbes that 40% of all new businesses are being started by women. And we're seeing that at WBDC. So just for some perspective, right? In 2019, prior to the recession, we were seeing roughly 800 women a year. In the first 6 months of COVID, our clientele increased by 650%.
Oh my gosh.
Since then, we have been increasing our clientele anywhere from 10 to 20% a year. We finished 2025 at about 3,800 clients, which is about a 330% increase since 2019. So we can talk about the whys and wherefores, but clearly women are taking control of their lives, of their financial lives, of their families into their own hands. They are willing to take the risk. They're stepping up. They're like, well, if you're going to cut me out and you're going to cut me off, I'm going to take care of this and do this myself. I may start out with a little bit less, but in the end, I'm going to have more control and I'm going to be happier and my family's going to be happier. So I think that one of the silver linings for us was COVID, in that so many small businesses that had not known about our work found us because we offered such incredible support during that time. And then, of course, we were called on by the governor to be part of the COVID response and then the COVID recovery. And so during COVID, we became a grant maker, because putting small amounts of capital into the hands of women, we saw a big difference that it was making. So we know that when women receive a $10,000 grant from WBDC with the intent that that grant is going to be used to impact their bottom line, to have a measurable impact on their business, we know that 80% of them actually deliver on that by seeing an increase in their revenues. We know that they hire more employees. We know that their profits increase. And so knowing about that impact for us and reporting on that impact to our stakeholders and giving them, sharing with them the return on investment when you invest in women goes from why invest in women only, to my earlier point of convincing policymakers,
Right.
to why not, right?
Right. We've kind of been looking at the big picture, the big impact, and congratulations on 3,800 clients. Can you take a little more granular for a second and say, what does it look like to be a client? And for people who don't even still know, hopefully they now know you exist, what does it look like to be a client? And I know there's a range in terms of like getting a little support versus full on. Can you share what a typical, if there is a typical client journey looks like when somebody comes to work with the WBDC?
Sure. So I'll start out by saying that our clients come from all walks of life at all stages of business development. So it's from startup to established business. So the journey is different depending upon the client's need, and we do an assessment for each client. So you might reach out to us via email, and there is a client services email that everyone could find on our website. And you reach out and you probably get a response within 24 to 36 hours that says, thanks for reaching out. Tell us a little about yourself and what your needs are. And so you explain what you're looking for. Oftentimes people aren't really sure about what they need. And so the team then reviews that information and helps direct the client to the right thing. It could be that you need a business advisor that's going to help you look at a contract that you're thinking about signing, or maybe you need an attorney, and we will find you an attorney that can do that. Or it could be, I've been at the farmer's market for 5 years selling my pies. I'm dancing as fast as I can. I need to legitimize this business and I don't know how to do that. So we can help you do that. And then it's an eye doctor, an interior designer, a kombucha maker who says, I've been in business. I need capital to grow my business. I'm seeing so many patients. I need to hire another doctor. How do I go about doing that? So there's business planning classes, there's mentoring. Of course, there are the grants. And then we also have a vertical in the childcare industry. Some people may not know this, but the governor deemed childcare providers essential during COVID. And he charged WBDC with distributing capital to them so that they could, during COVID, increase the number of spaces for children so that our essential workers could go back to work and maintain the number of seats that they had, because most states lost about 10% of their early childhood seats in COVID and they've not recovered. We didn't lose any. And we didn't lose any because, again, he had the foresight and the vision to say, how do we help these businesses that are operating on a shoestring already? And so since then, we saw such a demand that we created this vertical, and we're offering all kinds of business service guidance to them, as well as capital, providing them with capital.
You're right. Well, only when I was doing my research did I learn about this. So I'm glad we got to talk about that. Fran, you're coming up on your 30-year anniversary, or let's just say you're in the glow of the 30-year anniversary.
Yeah.
What's giving you hope right now as you're looking forward? I mean, and looking forward in terms of what's getting you excited and gives you hope. And I know you've got some sort of projects and initiatives coming down. I'd love to hear that, just in terms of like capitalizing on all the other amazing work that you've done and keeping us looking in that direction.
Thanks for the question. What keeps me going and what keeps me motivated is the team of women that I work with, both my colleagues at WBDC and the women entrepreneurs in Connecticut. Watching people come in with an idea and then seeing them, visiting them in their place of business to learn about what they've done, that they've actually opened their doors. And We often think more people need to know about us, but I had such an uplifting experience a few weeks ago. I was in a coffee shop. Sometimes because I'm always in the car and traveling, I kind of hold court at different clients throughout Connecticut,
I
coffee
love
shops,
that.
days or restaurants. But I was in Ridgefield and I was sitting at this table just working. And this woman came over to me and she said, "Are you Fran Pastore?" I said, "Yes." And she said, "I just want to tell you that I came to WBDC during COVID. I had an idea. I didn't have any confidence in myself, but I didn't want to go back to work. And I have a business now. And I have $500,000 in revenue." And I was just, that made my day.
I have goosebumps. Oh my gosh.
Isn't it?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then when I was paying my bill and leaving, another woman said to me, "Are you Fran Pastore?" And I said, "Yes." And said, "I'm a client of WBDC's and I'm actually filling out my grant application right now. We've been a client for like 4 years and we're so excited and we've gotten so much help and the business has grown." And that, I get goosebumps even repeating that story because it's so not about me. Like, it's so not about me. It's about this incredible work that the team does every single day, making sure that nobody falls through the cracks. And if we can't help somebody, making sure that they get the help that they need. For example, we don't have lawyers on staff, but we have access to, I swear, just about every major law firm in the state that is willing to give their time and their talent to clients to help them through a particular issue. That's what motivates me, is that we've created this thing that
Yeah, it's more than an ecosystem. It's more than an ecosystem. Yeah, that's
people
amazing.
believe it and want to help and want to support. So that's what kind of keeps me motivated every day. And then on top of that, I'm just happy that we live in a state that cares about this issue and understands the contributions that women make to society. And we've been really lucky. We've been really, really lucky. Corporate support, private philanthropic support from our state. We've been very, very fortunate.
Well, you've mentioned COVID and community and connections and networking. And obviously we're here on the HAYVN Hubcast. So you've been a huge supporter, Fran, of the work that HAYVN has done. So we want to thank you for that and having the wonderful relationship that HAYVN has had with you. Also, for those who, that you mentioned, like literally, you can go to your site and send an email. But also, you've mentioned you could always use more money. You always could use more advisors. How else can people get involved or get connected with you and the WBDC, if not through the client portal?
Sure. So you can email me directly and I will triage whatever it is that I'm being contacted about, whether it's if someone is interested in volunteering, if they're interested in the grant, I'll get you to the right person on the team. But most importantly, we have our second annual symposium for entrepreneurs coming up this fall in September, location TBD. We had it, the first one was last September. It was a very big success. We had over 200 attendees. And it's our opportunity to kind of showcase what we do in a one-day affair. And then that brings people into the fold and hopefully keeps them there so that we can help them throughout the life cycle of their business. Getting involved in terms of supporting our work, we have our gala, which is coming up on October 23rd in Greenwich. And if you're interested in attending or sponsoring, there's a page on our website that will take you right to the gala. And then last but not least, we have another round of grants coming up this summer. That's really important. And the way to find out about anything that we're doing is to go to the website, ctwbdc.org, and sign up for our newsletter. And from that, you'll find something in your inbox that's exciting and interesting every week. But the grants are coming up this summer for both childcare and non-childcare businesses. So if you need capital for your business, please do apply. And full disclosure, the application is not simple. And we do that for a particular reason. I shared earlier that it takes a woman an average of 6 attempts to secure capital from a traditional lender. The biggest reason is that they're typically not prepared. And so this application process helps you prepare to secure capital after WBDC, right? Because our goal is to break that glass ceiling that women still get stuck at in terms of securing capital for their business because of that law that was in place that was eradicated in 1988. but we still are struggling to access capital. I think it's less than 4% of all venture capital goes to women. So until we have representation, what we could do is move the needle little by little and get more people into the fold to educate them.
I like that full disclosure because it's a gift that will keep on giving beyond the grant process. So I appreciate that explanation. Fran, I could chat with you all day. We could talk about case stories. This has been such a treat and really enjoyed sort of looking at the arc of what you and the WBDC have done. As you said, we are lucky to live in Connecticut, but we're also lucky to have you as our champion. Thank you so much.
Thank you for doing what you're doing and for amplifying all this good work. Thank you so much, Nancy.
My pleasure. This has been another episode of the HAYVN Hubcast. If you like what you hear, please give us a review, a thumbs up, a share. If you're not a subscriber, please make sure you're a subscriber on your favorite platform. And we'll be back again with another episode.
Thanks for listening to the HAYVN Hubcast, a place to learn what business leaders and owners are doing to navigate and grow in today's market. Please leave a review on Apple Podcasts and subscribe on your favorite podcast app. HAYVN is a co-working space and virtual community located in the heart of Fairfield County, Connecticut. HAYVN is a hub for business owners and professionals to connect, create, and get stuff done. Find out more about the HAYVN community online at hayvn.com. That's HAYVN.com. HAYVN Hubcast is produced by Sound Advice Strategies.